So we're here to talk about the photo book. We're here to talk about Robert Frank's The Americans. Also, just before you get excited about the slideshow, there are 30 slides and one of them's a picture. And it's the last one. At least it's exciting at the end, right? It gets better. So one of the things I think that I'm really interested in, and these two slides, I think, because I can't quite understand how this works. Yes, okay. So, when we're talking about the photo book, I suppose that one of the things about Robert Frank's Americans is it is the photo book, right? And on some level, and if you've been unfortunate enough to be in my classes before, I'm quite obsessed with this idea of the use of the definite article. Like when you go to have a burger now, you can't just have a burger. It's the burger. No, when you go down to wherever, it doesn't matter, whatever crap burger shop it is, you have the farmer's fish burger or whatever. I don't know, some stupid thing, but it always has this definite article. Same with coffee, same with anything else. It's always the thing. And I'm not entirely sure whether this definite article helps or not. But Robert Frank, unfortunately, his photo book became the photo book. To the extent that he really, in a long relationship with it, he's still on the go, Robert Frank, as we know, he doesn't seem to like it that much. He gets quite cross about The Americans. And even before the book had been published, even before it came out, he was already making a film called Pull My Daisy. He had already moved on from photography in some way. So I wonder why. And I wonder if this definite article, if this word has anything to do with it. I like words, so I'm going to talk a bit more about words. And as it's Sunday, we should talk about not just books, not just the book, not just the photo book, but the book, right? So this is the first line of, is it? Yes. This is the first line of the Gospel according to John. I know that you're all missing church to be here, so I thought that, I should make up for it somehow. So the Gospel according to John, this is the first line, and it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Except it doesn't say word, really, does it? It says this instead, logos. And logos, although it sometimes means word, it also means lots of other things. It means word, but it also means reason. It also means truth. It also means all sorts of other things. One of the quotes that I was going to read to you is this rather long thing here, which has lots of versions of what logos means. For example, 2a, reason, the mental faculty of thinking, mediating, reasoning, calculating, which is kind of a different meaning from word. I mean, if you put in reason, so if instead of in the beginning was the Word, if we have in the beginning was reason, and reason was with God, and reason was God, that's a kind of a different ball game altogether, right? Or if we say truth, so if we say in the beginning was truth, and truth was with God, and truth was God, that might be a different kind of ball game too. So in the same way that the book or a book is a different thing, maybe logos, if we translate it in different ways, might mean some pretty different things. On the flyer thing, on the handout, it said that this was going to be a new look. Obviously, reading Greek, maybe it's not that new, but I'm going to proceed anyway. Book. The origin of the word book is German, not Greek or Latin, interestingly. And it comes from beech, the word for beech, like a tree. The word for book in Greek is biblio, and the word for book in Latin is liber, thus library and bibliothèque and bibliography and all these things. Both of these words also have their beginnings in trees, in the names for trees, which maybe means nothing. No, okay, who cares? It doesn't really matter, does it? But I was looking at a lovely painting this morning called The Death of Adam, which if any of you follow me on Miserable Instagram, you will have been subjected to already. If you don't follow me on Instagram, you can look at it on Instagram. The Death of Adam by Piero della Francesca, which is an extraordinary painting from around 1455, I think, where and it runs right to left, which is interesting enough, but a different topic. The interesting thing about it is that Adam, before he dies, sends one of his sons away to get some oil, right? He goes, off you pop to the angels, get me some oil and that'll keep me alive forever. And the angel's like, oh, didn't bother giving him oil. Just give him this wee tree. So it goes back, Adam dies, but they've got this tree. No, it's a bit sort of Jack and the Beanstalk or something a little bit. And they're like, right, fine, so what are we going to do with this tree? They plant the tree grows for ages and ages and ages. And trees, they're really useful. You can make paper out of them. You can make books out of them. Also, this tree, you could chop into pieces, make a cross, and nail people to as well. So I don't know, there's books, trees, interesting things, aren't they? I think they're all friendly in that. Not so. We're talking specifically about a book that has pictures in it. The word for picture in Greek is icon, and the word for picture in Latin is imago. So, imago. So, both of these things, again, maybe complicate matters even more. Icon, particularly, if the word that you have for picture is icon, an icon and a picture aren't the same thing, or they certainly don't seem to mean the same thing to us now. But if we started off, if picture came out of this word icon, maybe we have to think about it in a slightly different way. Or if not, if it came out of image, say, or we use image, right? We use icon too, but image was what leads to, of course, imagination and also imaginary and all of these other things. So there's maybe some difficulty there, that what we're doing in a book, which becomes the book, which made of paper and blah, 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 is made out of images. Images are imaginary, right? Images are imaginary, or they're made up, or we have an interesting relationship with them, certainly in the West. Also, there's an interesting thing, maybe if we think about what type of pictures we're looking at, what type of images, what type of imagination, what type of icons we're looking at. The pictures in Robert Frank's book, when we look up document, they're documentary pictures, I guess, right? Or they're documentary style. You know, Walker Evans, who's a great fan of Robert Frank, talks a lot about how he doesn't take documentary pictures, he takes pictures in the documentary style. Okay, document, it says, early 15th century teaching, instruction, from the old French document, lesson, written evidence, from Latin, documentum, example, proof, lesson, blah. You can read it, it's up there, right? But there's something quite legal sounding, there's something quite evidence-based about this idea of a document. There's a difficulty that arises then whether we're making a document or whether we're using a documentary style, as Walker Evans would say. How do we, as a reader, recognize the difference in what is a sincere documentary approach and a documentary rhetoric that's being used to, frankly, the same end? I don't know, maybe there's maybe a slightly complicated thing going on there. Even if we are using only a documentary style rather than producing a documentary, it's still maybe has the same effect on us. So we're looking at a book which has a specific historical meaning. We're looking at a book of images which have blah, 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 and then we're looking at special documentary pictures, which, oh my God, it's very confusing, all this Robert Frank stuff. Another question that we might ask on a Sunday is, who is Abraham? Because there's a big thing here, right? We have a book about the Americans by a Swiss guy. So it's quite Western-centric, our whole thing, this idea of the photo book seems to be kind of relatively based in kind of the West half, I guess. Abraham, or Abrahamic religions, are 50% of the world. So I mean, the thing is also, we could be like, what are you talking about here, this book, this idea of the book? 50% of the world's population follow in some way, or at least are brought up under or with or whatever, Abrahamic religions. All of whom have a particularly interesting relationship to the book via Moses, I guess. I've written a slide here which says, who is Abraham and Moses? They're right into books. The book. Getting passed down the tablets of stone, which say on them the laws by which we're going to live, if we are Christian, Muslim, or Jewish, these things have an enormous impact on the way that we understand how morality, ethics, images, and our relationship to all of this stuff works. So we have a particularly special relationship to books and the book. You know, I guess on some level Moses was the first librarian or something. No, he had this special, lovely, big, massive, hefty book that he had to take care of and then give out to other people and make sure that they understood it. This is my favorite slide. My students always cringe when I do this slide. So we got a problem then, I guess, when Abraham and Moses and all of our Abrahamic stuff comes to an end with modernity, right? I mean, of course, people were talking about it. Lovely David Hume, who's up the road there on his statue and all that. But modernity happens, and then God dies. And we have a bit of a meltdown. We're like, oh, well, goodness gracious. For one, we killed her, if we believe Freddie Nietzsche. You know, that's horrible news, right? Not only is God dead, but we murdered her. Oh, no, we'll have to do something about that. And if we believe Dostoevsky as well as Friedrich Nietzsche and around 1880, not only if God is dead and we killed her, then everything is permitted, which, actually I lied, there is more than one picture. There are three. If God is dead and everything is permitted, brilliant, we can do whatever we want, right? You can just get drunk, party, you know, I happen to swear, so you could, you know, maybe you could have sexual relationships promiscuously or something, I don't know. Or it might be that everything is permitted, and that means that we have to therefore be in charge of everything that's ethically, morally been decided for us up until this point. What happens if the book isn't the book? What happens if Moses receiving these stones, maybe that was just made up, maybe it was oh, shite. I swore I couldn't help it. It just came out. Maybe that didn't happen, right? So we're going to have to decide then, in this instance. We're going to need a bigger boat, right? Like in Jaws. We're going to need some sort of other book. Because we're so dependent on this idea of a book, we're going to need some sort of other book. We're going to need some new form of writing, maybe. Because writing's boring, right? You know, or Roland Barthes and all these people, we recognize relatively early on into modernity that writing's boring and no one can be bothered reading. It's just too long, no? Need some pictures. Same as in church, right? No one read the book. I mean, up until the 16th century, no one even could read the bloody book. You just saw the pictures on the wall and you liked them, and then you understood the special story, and then the boy at the front told you what to do, and then as long as you didn't do that, then you wouldn't go to hell. Good. So we need some pictures as well, and ideally it would be really good if we could put the pictures in a book. No? What a super thing that would be. So luckily, just before God snuffed it, we had invented photography. So in 1840, we invented this magical system where you could reproduce pictures as much as you wanted, and you could put you in them as well. You didn't need to be Jesus or anyone. You could be you. You get your loincloth on, climb up a tree, do whatever you want. You could do all sorts of things. You could imagine yourself as all sorts of different icons, images, imaginations, all these sorts of things. Then, I don't know, if we maybe Miss Marple, we don't need to get Miss Marple in for this. It's relatively obvious who killed God, I think, here, right? And what the murder weapon was, right? It was a Rolleiflex or a Leica or some other thing. Disgusting. Murderers, photographers, they really are. How do we do it? We've got the tool, right? We've got the stuff, we can print stuff, we can photograph stuff, we can reproduce it as much as we want. How do you do it? Generally speaking, by borrowing the form of dominance of the thing that went before. So the new thing, as it says up here, steals the method of dominance from the old thing to become the new thing. So we get a photo book, right? Let's make a book with pictures in it. It's nice and quick. No one will have to read it properly or anything. You can just batter through them, innit? You pick them up in the shop, open them at the back, flip through them. You've got it. Maybe. The trouble with photos, though, you know, we have to remember what Walter Benjamin taught us all, right? In miserable classes that we've all attended, the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction, or the work of art in the age of its mechanical reproducibility, which I think is probably a more accurate and useful way of translating the title of Benjamin's essay. These are not tablets of stone photos. They're infinitely reproducible items, right? The infinity of photography is in photography. The terrifying thing, perhaps, about a photograph is that it proves that God's not there because the photographs themselves are infinite, so there can't be anything else that's infinite. And they're utterly ordinary at the same time. And it's like we don't make a photo, is it? Just some stupid machine does it. You just press this button, and then mystically some light sort of hits off some stuff, right? Light is hitting off some stuff, then this was my thinking at about 10 minutes to midnight last night, as I was writing this. If a photo is like hitting off some stuff and then being recorded by a thing which is mechanically incapable of interpreting that stuff, then so long as we understand the process of photography, then the resulting inscription of light must be true, right? Not entirely true, but on some level true. We read photos as being, at least in some part, true. Right? So, are photos a bit like God? I bet you didn't expect to hear that when you came out this morning. Or it's like God writing. No, there's something going on. Here's the very first bit of the Bible. The very, very, very first bit. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And then here is, as we all do in day one photo class, light, writing, photo, graphos. How much should be? Oh, yeah? Oh, great. I've done it really fast. This is a big list of words that says, I can't read it. Word, truth, book, livre, biblio, document, Abraham, Moses, God, Freddy, Fyodor, Jean-Paul Sartre, politics, science, propaganda, proselytizing, creation, Genesis, gospel, revelation, life, death, light, right, right, right. This is the word the. Of all these words, of all the things that perhaps we could think about in terms of what happens when we produce a book, what happens when we use photos to make a book, and what happens with our specific relationship to books, our specific relationship to writing, our specific relationship to light writing, our specific relationship to photography as a reproducible medium, maybe a really big important word to come back to is this word the. That Robert Frank made a book which became the photo book, which he hated to such an extent that he took his test prints for it and had his friend drill holes through all of them. And then he tied them together with a piece of wire, cable, right? So he took his test prints from the Americans and drilled big holes, and he didn't even do it. He got his pal to do it. And then he took another print, which wasn't even included in the Americans from later on, and put that on top to hide the pictures of the Americans. So much did he dislike them. And then he put them on top of these sort of faded old pictures and of his family and various other sort of bits and pieces. I don't know if Robert Frank was ever really that keen on having made the photo book. I think he was quite happy when he made a photo book. And I think this is a much more interesting piece of work than maybe the Americans is now. That's it. I mean, like there are 4 more pages here that I wrote. I can read them as well, but or we could, I don't know, have a talk or ask questions or something.
Questions are very welcome.
Talk amongst yourselves, and then I can shout it out.
Okay.
Hi, John.
Yeah. So, isn't the reason the book is so famous in that it came out at a time that we in Europe had decided to make the God of America, like things that helped us win the war. Jack Kerouac had written On the Road. So it was a book that came out just at the right time when we were falling in love.
Right. So John's question is the book about America as a god? So had we decided at this point, so Robert Frank's book came out in 1958, 59, and then in French at first, and then in English later on in a radically different version. The French edition has quotes by various, clever authors next to each picture and so on. Those were all stripped out and taken away, and the edition that we know basically looks not entirely like, not very much at all like the first edition, which had these quotes. But were we Europeans a particular moment in history when we were really into America? Did we want to make a god out of America? Is John's question. I don't know the answer. John's saying yes is the answer. I don't know. I mean, I think the thing was that that we have, that photography answers a lot of questions by being like science, by being like truth, by being like lots of things that aren't mystical, which logical positivists like yourself, John, find problematic, I think. So I think photography, it's a combination of things, I suppose, yeah. But also, I mean, I didn't talk about the content of Robert Frank's book because I'm assuming that most of you have already seen it. If you're unlucky enough to be in my class, you'll have seen it at length. I mean, I love the content of Robert Frank's book. It's an extraordinary, beautiful, searing social criticism, which is very, very necessary. Yeah, I don't know if many Americans, certainly the American publishers, didn't think that Robert Frank's book was a love song to an American god in any way. I don't think so.
But it came at a time when we decided to eulogize that type of culture, that type of freewheeling,
Yeah.
hippie beat culture, and it just came out at the right time.
Yeah.
The zeitgeist of that time.
I mean, I don't know that it certainly is beat in some way, and Robert Frank certainly identified a lot with beat people, but at least as much with European existentialism and things, I think, is where it was coming out from. So the inclusion of the Jack Kerouac was something that came later on. The original book was, the quotes were by 𝗧𝗹𝗸𝗀𝗀 and people like this. So, I mean, it became. How did it come about? It came about for the American edition. Yeah. Sorry, David.
Yeah, just for information, not a question, but just reminded of my wife's Spanish, and she tells me that the Spanish translation of our version of "in the beginning was the word" is actually "in the beginning was the verb," which I find more interesting.
Yeah, much more interesting. Yeah, like naming, and I mean, I think that becomes a really big, yeah, and but that becomes a big thing, I think, particularly in sort of Judeo-Christian cultures as well, doesn't it? It's like, who named stuff? You know, there's the big thing, and there's a big. Was in Paradise Lost, I'm sure the only thing that Eve's allowed to name are the flowers. Like Adam named stuff, right? That was like a man thing, naming shit. Stuff, and then so did God name stuff, or did Adam name stuff, or did even what was the relationship, and what's the enormous power in naming stuff, and then I think also what's the relationship where a photo almost circumscribes the necessity of naming, like how does a sort of verb noun relationship exist when it comes to a photograph? As a thing, and as a doing, and as an activity, I suppose.
Yeah, I like verb.
Verb's good.
Verb to word.
Verb to word, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Why isn't Walker Evans's book American Photographs not the book?
Good question. So why isn't Walker Evans' American Photographs the photo book rather than Robert Frank's photo book, The Americans, the photo book? I don't know. I mean, the question could equally be asked of Eugene Smith's Pittsburgh project, I think, which is, I mean, it never really became a book, but was certainly, he was making it and trying to publish it before Frank. The approach is similar in many ways. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is a really interesting question as to why Robert Frank's book hits a nerve so precisely. I mean, I think, as John says, there's a lot to do with it being cool, being beat, being associated with Jack Kerouac. I don't think did it any harm. Being published by the Grove Press didn't do it any harm. The sort of Lady Chatterley's Lover Trial was, I think, the same year or the year before The Americans came out. Very, very close by. So the Grove Press had just been being really cool and really in the public eye, and then they bring out this book of pictures, which, to a large extent, lots of stuffy old miserable photo people are saying these aren't proper pictures because they're not in focus or blah blah. So then you go, well, you say expletives to them, and you buy it, I guess, maybe.
What do you think is the photo book of 2000?
The photo book of 2000. I mean, we're at a book fair, so I don't. I think that I'm not entirely sure that the book is a suitable way to deal with the way that photography works now. I think the absolutely monumental infiniteness of photography is very, very suited to digital and sort of ethereal display. So I don't know. I mean. Maybe in terms of the nostalgia, in terms of our desire for the past, it's probably still the Americans. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. I think it's still there, maybe. Do you want to go like Pied Piper to Stills? I'd really like if we could all go together. Yeah, thank you.